Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Spencer TCG here. Before we get started, I wanted to say that after playing in a few showdowns and just playing this game for generally a long time, I have decided that Green Rebel has just some insane cards with Ewing, Reinforcement, and Home One. I know most of us already knew that, but I started just throwing them into other decks and I realized that, hey, these decks are actually pretty viable. So if you guys are a Cassian Andor lover and you still have a showdown coming up, I want you guys, if you believe in me, to give this one a try. I think you will have some success. But let's talk about the deck. So like I was saying, the combo of Ewing Reinforcement, just summoning multiple guys, and as well as Home One recurring different things throughout the game is really insane. I'm mostly a Han Solo player, and the reason Home One is so good is because, you get to put your cards into resources, they die, and then Home One can recur them later on. But the cool thing about playing red instead of yellow is that your cards are actually really strong, so almost anyone you get back will be really powerful. And in the Omega late game at 9 resources and above, getting back your K2SO every single time with Home One is kind of insane. And yeah, that's the idea of the deck. We're playing for a cause, and as you see, it almost hits everything besides resupply. If you really take a look at this deck, it looks like we're playing Sabine almost. We're playing very, very similar cards. They probably play more Spec Force Soldier, no Sparks, and maybe one less Akbar. And obviously their top end is substituted for usually one or two costed cards, maybe a Steadfast Battalion, maybe an Energy Conversion Lab. Here we are, getting 30 health and playing Cassian. So before we talk about the list, we could talk about what are we losing by not playing Sabine. So, Sabine gets to ping every turn. Let's just say she does that. So she gets to ping 3 times on 2, 3, and 4 resources before she summons. And let's say she lives for 2 turns. So she's not technically pinging us on turn 5. And then, on turn 6, she pings one more time. And we're going to talk about that. So she's now pinged us 4 times and attacked twice, giving her a grand total of 4 + 3 + 3, which is 10 damage. Cassian Andor on turn 6 just summons and attacks once for a grand total of 4 damage. So on 6 resources, we are going to be about 6 damage behind, assuming Sabine has lived 2 turns. Now, if our Cassian also lives 2 turns, he will have done 8 damage, and the Sabine will have done 11. One more ping. So they become a lot closer. So if they both live for 2 turns, I don't know if that's asking a lot. I think a lot of my games, Cassian does live for 2 turns. 6 defense is a lot, especially if you resupply into him. There's not much that just one-shots the man, especially since we have other cards on the field doing our bidding. So we're only 3 damage behind a Sabine at 7 resources, which is a good note, and if our leaders both stay alive for 2 turns. So that's what we're sacrificing. But at 7 resources, we're playing 3 Ewing Reinforcement and 3 Mace Windu. Mace Windu is actually a sick card. I know it's a showdown prize, but it doesn't see a lot of play just because there really isn't, this color combo that wants to go a little bit later. And the great thing about this deck, it doesn't mind playing in the late game. Cassian Andor draws us a ton of cards throughout the game if we want to slow it down a little bit. And we are playing, these really strong cards that can actually play into blue control. Like Ewing Reinforcement, summoning multiple guys is very annoying for blue control, especially if we resupplied, which this is the reason why the card is in here for control. If we didn't resupply, then obviously they can play their blow up the field spell after Ewing. That's if we even needed to Ewing in the first place to build a board. But again, because we're casting, we probably still have 5 or 6 cards. We just fill up the board again, so they can't really avenge her, and they have to Super Laze Blast us again, which is the same reason that Han Solo is actually super good into control. This deck has a lot of the same notes, but, we're playing K2SO, which can not only burn, but make them discard. So if you play this card a couple times and you notice your opponent is low on cards, you can just make them discard their cards out. Bringing it back with Home One becomes a little bit silly too. All right, but let's talk about the deck finally. So on turn one, we are, playing Battlefield Marine or A-Wing or Sabine Wren. So we have 9 targets that we're looking for. The Spec Force Soldier is not for playing on turn one. It is a U-Wing and Home 1 target. It's a little bit more utility. It has, the good guy tag on it. So our For a Cause does not miss, which is nice. But yeah, this card is just a utility card. I can see moving it up to 2, but I don't know what I would cut. Getting this deck down to 50 was already hard enough, so I liked it at 1 in testing. If I had to say which one's best to play, I would honestly, in Mulligans, try to keep an A-Wing and one of the ground units if you have the chance. That way you can just go opposite whatever your opponent's doing. In this game, it's pretty strong to go opposite if you think you're going to have a stronger, more powerful start, which usually you do with, fleet lieutenants and wing leaders. I would say you only want to match them if you have the initiative and you're playing against like Sabine or something, because then you should be able to survive long enough and then outvalue with the extra draws you get from Cassian when you play him out. So on turn 2, we are looking to play a red 3, a fleet lieutenant or a wing leader, in my opinion. Fleet lieutenant just gets that damage in really nicely, though I will say for if you're not using it to trade and you're just using it for face, then maybe we can save a fleet lieutenant for the next turn, and that we just want red 3 and wing leader to just give our board buffs and permanent buffs with the experience tokens. Fighters for Freedom is also nice because it has 4 defense. Echo-based Defender is another card we could play, and it's I think a little bit worse than everything else. He doesn't really protect our backline units because he only has 3 defense, which is the same defense as our other 2. So he's not really protecting them per se, right? If you think they have like a 3-2 on the board, like that 3-2 is just going to kill your 3-drop instead, which you rather than kill your Battlefield Marine or something like that. So we don't really want him doing that job. Fighters for Freedom protects itself better without Sentinel because it just has 4 defense and, threatens damage later on. The only reason I didn't say like it's our main priority is because Fighters for Freedom is actually a crazy late game card. You could think about that situation where we played U-Wing and our opponent Super Laser Blast, the next turn. So we still have our whole turn to play out cards and they're all tapped out. So we can play Fighters for Freedom and like 2 more res spells and just get in that 2 extra damage. And we just filled up the board. And yes, we will have the hand because we're playing Cassian. So this card is actually kind of crazy in the late game. It needs to be answered, like removed from the field right away, because you can play a lot of red cards, turns out. On turn 4, we're looking to play either another 3-drop and using Cassian ability, or playing General Dodonna or K2SO. Probably always opt for the K2SO if you have it. Dodonna is situational. If it's going to die, like probably don't play it and maybe see if you could do a 3-drop and use Cassian Andor ability. Dodonna's at 2. I mean, it's searchable. I wouldn't say it's like the best ever card to play on curve, but sometimes it's really strong. And it's really good off, a home 1 target or a U-Wing reinforcement to buff our whole board. Home 1 is such a good card, guys, because it can beat Avenger with Wing Leader and General Dodonna. Like you're matching its stats with Dodonna, which is pretty cool. So that's why this deck has viability into control later on. And if you notice, we don't play 5 or 6-drop cards. This is actually a really common thing between a lot of my decks, especially in decks that I'm playing resupply. So on turn 4, another option for us is to play resupply, so that way we can jump right into our Cassian Andor turn, where we're probably trying to see if we can use ability and then summon Andor. But yeah, we don't play any 5 or 6 drops. I just don't think they're that strong in the game, especially like later in the game. We're playing U-Wing, and I think those are kind of whiffs off U-Wing. So I rather just sacrifice a little bit of power on that turn 5. And be okay with that. Like I can also drop a 4-drop on turn 5 and try to use my ability. So yeah, I would say at 5 resources, that's when this deck has its like weakest turn. But other than that, it's like all gas. Like we play so many 3-drops that you can definitely drop 2 3-drops on 6 resources. And on 7 resources and above, obviously we're coming with all the gas. So if you ever have a U-Wing or a Mace Windu and they're both in hand, that's actually pretty board defended. If your Mace Windu can kill something and stay alive, and not get attacked that same turn, and then you always Mace Windu, that just seems like a really broken play, right? Like you're hitting them in the face for 5. This deck will just kill them sometimes. Like we are playing burn spells. We are playing all the Sabine cards that Sabine is playing. We're just losing those extra points of damage that we talked about. So, and now there's a bug on my nose, which is just wonderful, guys. Okay. And yeah, that's the whole deck. So it is pretty actually fun. Like it's a fun deck. It's viable. I never thought that I'd make a viable, like, I don't know if we'll say tier 1, but it is really good. You know, I think the idea of tier 1 is, you know, they're just like strong in the meta. And I will say Yu Wing and Home 1 are like super incredibly strong in the meta right now. So these cards are tier 1. And K2SO is a tier 1 card. You know, Red 3 is a tier, you know, like, so a lot of these cards are like tier 1. Do they work with the leader? I think so. I think you guys should try it out. And you know, maybe you just always wanted to play Cassian, never had a good shell, and I've been working on this secretly on the side, and I really do like this deck. I'll be playing it today in my locals and trying to get some recorded games in as well. So we can talk about the sideboard now. So we get that third copy of a lot of cards. Spark of Rebellion, Admiral Akbar, Bright Hope, and Home 1. They're kind of situational just to see what our opponent's doing. The Spark and Home 1 are for control. You probably don't bring in Home 1 against anything else except like maybe against a Luke, like a slower mid-range, like a more, control style deck. I guess I've never really talked about paying 4 for Spark of Rebellion. It's definitely worth it sometimes. This card, I think, if you want to beat Han, like you need to be playing Spark of Rebellion, even though it costs 4 resources. That's like when they could be Haning. They'll never see it coming because you're not playing yellow, and if you hit the only 7-drop in their hand, you instantly win the game. So this is just a little sneaky card that can actually win a lot of games, and as soon as they know you have it, they have to play completely differently in the next game. So it's not like, hey, gotcha. I mean, it is, but like in the next game, like they have to be wary of it, which changes their whole play style, makes them slow down a little bit, which is exactly what you want in order to match value. You also never really talked about that Cassian, you know, one-shots Iden because he has Saboteur and, you know, doesn't die to any attack because it has 6 health. So the leader is really strong. I guess since we're talking about the leader in an interjection, we could talk about the base too. We don't really need to sacrifice the 5 health to come in and ambush something, in my opinion. I think 5 health is just, you know, universally always good, right? Like I always have 30 health. I don't have to worry about activating my ability. 25 health is when you want to play Steadfast Battalion and kind of just say, hey, got you guys. Like that's like a Sabine play, and I really don't think it's that strong anyway. If your opponent answered Sabine, like you're just playing worse base at that point, in my opinion. But anyway, so we'll go to the rest of the sideboard. So we have 3 open fire. That's for like the more aggressive decks. You could take out some of the more, you know, controlling tools like Spark of Rebellion if you want, which isn't terrible against Sabine because you could hit for a cause in the later game. But yeah, you know, it's not great. Or you could take out some of the top end and put in, you know, the Admiral Akbar, the Bright Hope, and the Open Fires. Forced Surrender is actually like an insane card against control, especially since our leader comes out at 6 and is pretty unanswerable by them. We can play Cassian, we can hit them draw a card and play Forced Surrender, draw 2, make them discard 2. At that point, they'll probably have 0 to 1 cards in hand and you'll have like 6 or something. And then, you know, just play to attrition them. And it becomes super, super difficult for them to recover. And again, they'll never see Forced Surrender coming. And usually control players are keeping like, you know, all their top end in their hand on 6 resources. So you probably just made them discard like Super Laser Blast and Avenger, which is effectively killing them and getting rid of 1 copy. Also, sometimes you might just hit a Vigilance. It lines up pretty well there. So I really do like Forced Surrender, and it is for the control matchups. Yeah, and that's the deck, guys. Any tips and tricks for playing the deck? I have no idea. Just play like you're playing Sabine, and then all of a sudden, you never run out of gas. So if you guys have played Sabine, you actually think this playstyle is very, very similar. You're doing all the same things. You're looking for all the same face plays, except, you know, sometimes you can take a trade and it won't feel as bad. And also, like, at the late game, when your opponent's like, man, they have so many cards, like, you're going to feel like that too. Like, you're going to be able to match them and play cards for the rest of the game, which is why I really like this leader. So anyway, guys, like I said, I'm going to try to get some gameplay of Cassian up because I don't want to just hey, say, hey, this is the deck, you know, believe in me. I'll try to get some gameplay up tonight so you guys can actually see the deck in action. That way, maybe you're like, hey, I love Cassian, was going to play him for my showdown anyway. I'm going to give this build a shot. You know, you can have a little bit more faith in me. So thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, peace.